uh, let's begin. And as we do in our sessions, we begin with a hello. Everybody give a high 10 to everybody else. So we say hello. That helps us get a little bit present, get in our bodies, have this conversation together. And our practice that we always start out with is a deep breath. So I'm going to ask you to take a deep inhale and relax on the exhale. And the reason we do that, it's actually the most fundamental and important leadership practice. Because when we face challenging moments, one of the things that happens is we tense up. And when we tense up, we don't have the flexibility to engage well. But if you'll take that deep breath, relax on the exhale, then you can become present. And being present is also crucial for learning. So as we have our conversation today, I may invite you to take a deep breath on occasion. Hello, Julio, welcome. And to do that, the purpose of that deep breath is to let go of any tension, but to get out of your head, to actually become present to the moment. So I'm going to ask you to do that. Take that deep breath, feel it all the way down to your feet. Notice that you can relax on the exhale. Let go of what's in your head as part of the relaxation, and that allows you to be present in a fuller way. Can you feel it? Fantastic. That's actually the inspiration for this series of webinars. This is the third of 3. And if you haven't attended or seen the prior 2 sessions, I invite you to watch the recordings. What we have been opening in this conversation is something that's not well understood in our culture. And that's that our internal states are what determine our external behaviors, our external actions, and our external results. But the Western culture that I grew up in, I wasn't taught how to pay attention to my inner space. It just wasn't there. It was all about out there, out there, out there. And as we've been on our learning journey for over 40 years now in this leadership track, when I first started to teach leadership, it was all about external results. Here's what you do, here's how to get the results, go, go, go. And we kept having the experience of people reporting, yeah, but what about this? What about my mood? What about other people's reactions? What about the human beings? And so over these 40 plus years, we've learned that the common sense about action for most people has left the human being out. That action's some kind of activity that you do out there for a result. And we forgot to bring all of us. And why is that important in leadership and in life? Because the leadership journey is a life journey. I don't hear that much. Leadership seems to be this field of technical technique, and you learn it and then you do it and you get the results. But we found as well on our learning journey that the life journey is what's really important. Is my work meaningful? Yeah, I can learn techniques and get better results, but am I living a good life? Am I living a meaningful life? Yes, I can drive results with better technique, but are we creating a culture that's healthy for human beings? Or have we created a culture that's really set up for mechanisms of production? And that's a very real and pervasive issue. In the last year and a half or so, one of the conversations in the United States has been the big resignation. And it's basically about people leaving the workforce or quitting companies or finding that the way of working that they were in was no longer a place they wanted to be. And there's all kinds of stories about it. It's the millennials, you know, it's the change of generations. But I think what we're seeing with that, and I think it was provoked by the pandemic, when we had to face our world, face our work, face our future, where the headlines were all about how many people were dying every day, life and death became a little more real. And that was combined with having to stay at home for many people, and many people couldn't stay at home. And both of them had to face big challenges. And so the question is what I'm doing fulfilling a life path, or am I sacrificing it because the pandemic woke us up to life matters? And in the perspectives that we've developed over the years, we've found that life and death is actually a choice you have in every moment. One of the quotes I love from Brother David Steindl-Rast, who wrote this beautiful book about gratitude. And he begins the book by this following statement. He says, "The fact that you are not yet dead is insufficient evidence that you are alive." And so it's raising the question, what is it to be alive? What is it to have a life? And I'm bringing this up in the context of leadership because leaders and professionals that have been working with us over the past 4 decades often have had to face the challenges in their work that were based on a context of sacrifice. If I just do more, I'll be successful. If I just do more, I'll be happy. But it doesn't seem to work out that way much. When you do more and you have no limit to the more that you're driving yourself to do, what you do is get depleted. What you do is begin to sacrifice lifetime for work time. And then we began to have a diminished life in a diminished world. So we have found that we need to pay attention to the life journey as the foundation for the leadership journey. To be healthy, to be connected to our sources of meaning, and to have that help us not only navigate in our own journeys, not only help us choose the direction of our careers, but to be the kind of leader that creates cultures and organization that brings people to their meaning, to their engagement, and they bring their best. It actually produces better performance. And the common sense is, no. In the old common sense, sacrifice and work. And what we find is, no, be alive, engage for what's meaningful, and then work, and you'll find better work and better results. This resonate for everybody?
Indeed.
Good, very good. So today, this is the third of the 3 sessions, and I'm going to do a summary of the first 2 to kind of produce a bigger story. As we're doing this, if this was medical school, and it is in a way, it's kind of the medical school of organizational life, of work life. The first thing you learn in the medical profession is anatomy. If you don't know the anatomy, you get lost. I mean, you know, how would we let you near human beings if you didn't know anatomy? And yet there is an anatomy of action. There is an anatomy of leadership. And yet we don't have the requirement yet for leaders to know the anatomy. And so sometimes they do their best or play the wrong game, and it's damaging to both their purpose to produce value in the world, and it's not particularly healthy for a culture of human beings. So I'm going to ask, to make this relevant today, I'm going to ask you, what is your top leadership challenge or opportunity right now as a leader or as a coach? What's the edge that you're finding yourself at? The edge is that place where we go from what we know to what we don't know. And there's possibilities over the edge. The relationship with the edge is very important because for many people, finding the edge of the unknown is frightening. They contract and they withdraw. I'm going to go back to what I know. But to be an effective leader, we're taking people to a shared future, a new future, often an unknown future. We can't just contract back to the comfort zone. We can't just repeat the past. So part of this journey is, how do we go beyond what I know to what's new for me? This has led us to the understanding in our own journeys that learning is a lifetime journey, not only for leadership, but for, I think, being a good life, because it puts us in touch with possibilities. It puts us in touch with our capacity for creation. So as a leader or as a coach, what's your biggest challenge or opportunity? And if you would, type something about that into the chat, because I'd love to address some of those edges while we're in our anatomy of leadership discussion today. That would be very helpful. In fact, I'm going to check in on the chat here. Yeah, what's the edge? So, and it could be one word: fear of success. Very good. That's not uncommon, Chuck. Getting nervous. That has to do with the relationship with fear. If you're going to lead, if you're going to create the future, there will be moments of fear. To be an effective manager, to take a stand in the face of disagreement, to deal with crisis and breakdown takes courage. And so fear is something that in our discipline, we build a relationship with. It's not something you suppress. It's not something to run away from. It's something to listen to. We want our fear to be an advisor, but not the commander. We don't give the steering wheel to the fear, but we listen. And then we go back to the place of our choice. Being in the service of my soul. Oh, I love that, Andre. That's part of what we understand the leadership journey is about, because if it's not, it's about that sacrifice out there in more mechanical activity. Transition from corporate America to starting my own company. Yeah, we often have what I'll call corporate refugees show up in our conversation, and in the coaching profession, that's often what we find. Continuation in practice and rhythm, very good. The fear of not knowing, we're going to take not knowing as the edge of possibility. And if it's the edge of possibility and the edge of what we know going to the unknown, one of the things we found over the years, I had students showing up with the following story. Bob, I'm facing a new situation. I don't know what to do. And it began to be a recurring theme. And it got me thinking. I said, because for me, not knowing didn't have that sense of being a barrier. So I began to look and say, what do we need when we hit not knowing? And what I saw was, we're in the wrong context. What is the context? Our context is the perspectives or interpretations that shapes how we see things, shapes how we understand things. And one of the first breakdowns in leadership development I found was when we gave people new distinctions and practices, they would put it into their old context, and they often didn't work. So when we told people how to take an action, but their old context was learning is understanding concepts. The understanding concepts didn't work. We needed a new context. Action is practice. Action is embodiment. And so what we learned about not knowing is that if not knowing is a barrier, that's a story. That's a context. And you can change that story. You can change that context. And so in generative leadership, not knowing is not the barrier to action. It is the beginning of action. There are dozens of practices for taking action when you don't know. You learn. You ask for help. You prototype. You experiment. You innovate. You invent. You lead. You plan. You design. Are you getting the point of the power, not only of this particular transition, but all of us, the part of being human is we come from our history. We see the world a particular way, and sometimes that way doesn't show us choices. And if we shift our perspective, we'll have different choices. Different choices give us different actions, give us different results. That's what leadership is all about. And Newell shared about accepting this is it. Yeah, I just turned 76, Newell, so I'm real close to that learning lesson. This is it. I don't have time for a redo in any major way. And so mortality has a gift. It makes your choices meaningful. I don't have the luxury to say I'll try it out and see what happens. I got to really refine my game here. But the good news is that wisdom is something we can learn earlier. Instead of just drifting in life and trying things out and seeing what happens and hope that it works out, we can begin to design the questions and the answers to the questions that shape our life and leadership journey. What are those questions? I call them existential questions. Who are you? What's your story? Where are you going in your life? Why are you going there? What do you think is going to happen when you get there? The point about those questions, this is one of those moments. Take a deep breath. The point about those questions is there's no right answer. No one can tell you the right answer. You have to choose. What's the context in which I'm going to answer that question about who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where I'm going, and what I want to be in service to. And we found these fundamental to leadership. Leaders who have that alignment with themselves can know how to choose their path, invite people to create the future with them with power. If people are not clear, it becomes a more technical kind of activity. How are we doing? Relevant for you? Fantastic. So let's begin. I'm going to do a introduction of this anatomy of leadership from the point of view of being what I'm going to call a generative observer, which means that we're looking to interpret what we're seeing in our world and to design the context from which we're seeing it that gives us choices that's going to create value, satisfaction, and meaning for me and for those I serve and those I work with. And too often, when we don't have that alignment, this becomes a technical field and action becomes mechanical. Activity just become a unit of production. So let me share my screen and let's begin this story. Here we go. So Before I dive into the story, I'm going to give an announcement of coming events, because if I don't, I never seem to get it in at the end. So I'm just letting you know what's coming. Now, we're going to be doing one of our Foundations of Generative Leadership workshops in October. It'll be online. It's scheduled for 8-hour days, October 19, 20, and 26, and a half day on the 27th. It's an intensive. The kinds of things we're talking about today, we dive in deep. We dive in to answer the questions and see how to take action in our lives. This workshop also happens to be the kickoff for 2 of our 1-year program tracks. One is our Coaching Excellence in Organizations track, and the other is our Generative Leadership track. So if that's of interest to you, save the dates. And if you know anyone for whom this is relevant, please let them know about this coming event. So the context. In our work in the generative tradition in the Institute, we're now in our 42nd year. We see that leadership and coaching leaders are professions. We're not going to learn leadership or how to coach leaders in any meaningful way with a weekend workshop or a webinar series. That's why our programs take time. That's why they're 1 year long. We need to learn anatomy, just like the physicians. We need to learn the anatomy. We need to learn the physiology. We need to learn the diagnosis. We need to learn the intervention. And we need to learn it not as concepts, but as performance arts, things we actually do. And the product of leaders and coaches is the bodies of other people, the way other people see their world, the way other people behave, the kind of results they're producing. So it's a profound profession, and one that hasn't been widely acknowledged yet. Why do we need this profession? This is kind of a picture of how a lot of organizations show up to us when people come and say, how do I deal with this, that, or whatever? Some things are going right, but a lot of things aren't. And one of the things that we've seen is the work of the Gallup organization. They do surveys on a global basis. They've done over 27 million of them last I checked. And they claim that in the US, 69% of employees are disengaged in their work. And the name of that issue, employee disengagement, is the wrong name, in my opinion. The name should be lack of leadership, because employee disengagement or engagement has to do with conversations. And conversations are what leadership is about, because our conversations and our stories create our world, create our future, dictate our actions and results. And so what the topics that we cover in what we've learned over these 40 years is how to manage results and promises. Now, I want to focus on this word promise because I don't use tasks. Tasks are disembodied concepts of activities with an outcome. But a promise includes a relationship between human beings. Every task is a promise. And maybe a small promise, like take out the garbage. Yes, I will. No, I won't. But it has to do with action to satisfy someone. And that's the view that brings the human being back into the mechanical world of action. Promises. We learned how to manage capacity, because one of the first breakdowns, most common breakdowns we find with leaders, teams, and organizations is overwhelm, overcommitment. Being overwhelmed is not a very rich place to be a value creator. It's not a very rich soil to do innovations from. People just grind. So managing capacity is a huge issue. When leadership says just do more, and that's what people do, it's the most primitive strategy there is. And if doing more is not enough, we need to stop and reinvent the game, not simply grind ourselves into sand. Managing team promises. The ICF in the coaching world is now offering a certification in team coaching. The question, I just did a webinar with ICF Brazil in celebration of Coaching Month, and we talked about team coaching. And ICF says, well, you do good coaching conversations, and then you have to have team development modalities and that you bring in. And I say, no, you need more than team development modalities. You need to understand what a team is. You need to be able to design in what we would call generative actions. What makes a team, what makes a team leader, the team leader. And we'll show some of the foundations of that. Rhythms of coordination. Many people work hard, but they don't do it with rhythm. And so one of the rhythms that shows up is constantly reacting to breakdowns. You see, we're going to see the lifeblood of the organization, and in fact, your life is the rhythm of your conversations. Physically, your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing. There are conversations that are just as important about what's meaningful in your life. What are your choices? What are your commitments? How are you doing with those commitments? Are they still relevant? Those are conversations that many people don't have because they're overwhelmed with doing. But a conversation is where we get the chance to step back, look, and choose. Promise-based planning rather than activity-based planning. Managing project promises, managing breakdowns, team conversations, managing customer satisfaction, and team leadership. This is pretty much what our first year, our programs last 3 years for people who want to go to a high level of performance. This is pretty much what we have found in our 40 plus years of what are the blind spots out there in the world. And so we got blindness. People don't know how to do these things. These are what they report are the issues. Well, our team performance is down. We're not getting the results. People are burning out. We got retention issues. I happen to be the leader. I'm exhausted and I feel lonely and I'm not having a good life. And so because these are blind spots, these are not inadequacies of people. These are cultural blind spots. As I introduced in the prior sessions, when we talk about how we see the world, we refer to that as being an observer. When you're an observer, you see options for action. And so when we expand your capacity to be aware of more, to observe the world better, you have more choices for action to get new results. But we've also found that understanding what actions are needed is not enough. You have to be able to perform them. It's not enough to know that I should say no when I never say no in my life. We need to learn as an actor to make appropriate moves. And that gets us back to those moments of fear when our old habits say, no, 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 you have to do it this way rather than make an authentic choice. When we look at living things, it has structure. This is leadership has a structure, but if we look at life, it has a structure. This is a picture of the DNA spiral. DNA is made of only 4 component elements. But what's amazing, when those 4 elements, that structure is put into a particular DNA strand, it produces life. Everything that's alive on our planet has this structure, including us. But the point here is there's something simple and fundamental that can be put together for infinite variety and possibility. And our capacity as human beings and leaders are the same. But we need to become self-aware, self-reflective. What is it to be a human being? If we go to companies and just say, what are human beings? Well, we have a human resources department. I'm going to beg to differ. I'm not a human resource. I would prefer to see departments of people and possibility. But if we look at our experience, there's an inner world and an outer world. And yet the world of action, the common sense of action, has only been privileging the outer world. And we need to reconnect them to connect to our power and our relevance for ourselves and for others that we lead. So we found in our decades of work that when you go to the work world, a lot of the conversations, most of the conversations are about results. Results in the world. Something got to happen out there, right? We need revenue, we need customers, we need results. But the only way these results happen is when human beings come together, organize themselves for the result. But that's where the problem is. That's where leaders and coaches and owners of companies report there's a lot of problems with this people thing. If I didn't have to deal with people, I think this job would be kind of fun, but I have to deal with people. And so that is the space of leadership. That is the space of coaching. That is the space of organization. In fact, it's the space of relationship. And where do we start learning about the we world, that this is all about me to we? Is we have to go to the me. We need to see, how am I oriented to this we world? Am I blind to it? Is there something I'm missing? And what we found, for most people, that's true, because it's the common sense. So when we learned in our 40-year journey how to get results in the world, big time results, we have to go to teams and organizations and relationships. And that takes us to the inner world. And that's what the first two sessions were about. That prepares us to go back out and interact with others in a way to coordinate action and produce results in the world. What is this inner world? We're gonna unpack that a little bit here. And so we have this inner world, our outer world, and we have others. We have to deal with others out there. And I put this full body image there to begin to orient us that when we look at communication or interaction with people, we often make it very mental. We often make it very content oriented. But when we're interacting with each other, it's a full body experience, right? We're having it right now. I'm here, I'm chattering away, and you're having a reaction of, whatever's going on. Each one of you has a different reaction to this we space that we're creating right now by being together. And so what is this interaction? If we say what happens in leadership, but it's also what happens in life. People interact with people. As a result of that, they take actions, and we get results. Seems simple, except we don't seem to know what those interactions are. Seems to be a big question mark. So when we see new leadership interaction, they produce new actions and new results. And so for leaders, for coaches, and in the context of human beings living a good life, we want to answer the question, what are those interactions? In fact, what is action? We raised that issue in the last webinar you had. We're going to have a powerful, different answer that shows the world in a different way. And we also had the question that I started in the first webinar of what is a human being? What makes us human? Our generative answer to that, which means it's something we can see and do, not just a theory, is what makes us human is that we care. You see, we live in language. And because we live in language, we have futures. The future lives in our stories. There's no place to go to see the future. It ain't here yet. But you have a story about it. And so we have an emotional reaction to the futures we want and the futures we don't want. That fundamental ground of our emotional relationship with the future is called care. There's things we care that we want to take care of and have manifest, and there's things we want to avoid. And that's fundamental. So the anatomy of action, which we went into in detail in what the webinar on the core of leadership, if you really want to hear a longer explanation. But here's the summary. The common sense of our culture is we take action and get outcomes. Makes sense, right? But the new common sense, the new observer, the illumination of the blind spot is that it's commitment that shapes the action, that shapes your result. What are you committed to? And in fact, commitment is an action. When you say, I will do this, you have made a powerful act. You have just created a piece of the future. And it was when this was introduced to me for the first time 40 years ago, it changed my world. And where do these commitments come from? Conversations. Conversations you have with each other, conversations you have with yourself. And what we found is over 42 years now, in every event, I ask people, if you have a counterexample to this set of relationships, I would like to hear it. We haven't had one yet. We've never had an outcome that we couldn't identify as a product of prior conversations. Sometimes those conversations happened decades ago when you were a kid, for example, but there were conversations. And sometimes the way we access them is in conversation. What does this mean? All outcomes come from conversation. All of them, not just some of them, all of them. They come from the conversations you have, the conversations you don't have, the conversations you do well, and the conversations you do poorly. That principle, if you get nothing else from the conversations we're having, that will change your life. When you start changing your conversations, you will start changing your mood, you will start changing your possibilities, you will start changing the actions that you and other people take, you will find your power. But care is the other part that we found that produces the value, satisfaction, and meaning of the outcome. If you don't care about the outcome, it doesn't have value. It's not satisfying, and it's not meaningful for you. So here are these inner states, care and commitment. They happen inside of you. They're happening inside of all of us. They're going on all the time. And this is the inner world that we have to become aware of, build our relationships with, and the conversations we have with ourselves too, and the conversations that happen to us, that chatter in our head. That's our inner world. That's what we have to become aware of. We want to design that world because it will empower us in our life experience, and it will also empower us in our outer actions, which include the way we act, the outcomes we get, and the conversations we have with others. So the we space, we use an acronym called SELPH, that's in the last webinar, to represent somatics, emotions, language, practice, and history. And that's been a powerful acronym to understand all the dimensions of our experience that are going on at the same time. So in our somatics, I'm now talking about going from the me to the we. You and I are either connected right now or we're not. Are we connected? What's your experience? You feel connected here, right? And if you feel connected, just take a deep breath and disconnect, saying, oh, I don't care about this. I'm going to go eat some Cheetos and see what's on Netflix, right? And so this is part of the we world that we found. It's not just conversations that produce action. It's a full body experience. We're either present in our full body experience or we're not. We're either open and connected or we're not. So I'm going to do an exercise with you now, because one of the biggest issues I've found with learning leadership and coaching and this generative perspective is most of us have been educated in traditions that learning is understanding. So we're very good at understanding concepts. But in performance arts, it doesn't matter what you understand. You have to be able to act. You can't understand your way to playing the piano. You can't understand your way to playing tennis. You got to get on the court and play, and leadership is the same. So this is the language that is fundamental to the we world. But let's experience it so we can do it. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you. I'm going to ask you to play. And you can do this with your camera on or off, whatever you're comfortable with. But I'm going to ask you to actually play. And I'm going to give you instructions. We're going to do 4 quick rounds of present, open, and connected so that you experience it, so that we're not talking in just conceptually. Are you ready to play? Okay, give me a high 10. Come on, let's connect here. Very good. Okay, so if you have your camera on, I recommend it. And actually, the exercise is even better if you stand up, but that's up to you, if you want to do that or not. What I want you to do is pick somebody on the screen. It doesn't matter who. Pick somebody on the screen so that you can look at them. I want you to feel like they're your practice partner here, whoever it is, right? Now I'm going to give you instructions. 2 instructions here. One is this is done in silence, no talking. You can move, but you can't move your feet or your butt. Okay? So now I'm going to have you experience being not present with your partner. So I want you to physically act out, however however you do, it's fine. But I want you to now experience being not present with your partner. Just act it out. But I want you to notice what it feels like to be not present. And as you're acting it out, I want you to notice what it feels like to be with someone who's not present with you. Just notice. Nothing to do. What conversation is going on? This is a conversation that does not require words. What future is showing up? You can feel it. Okay, take a deep breath, shake it off. Very good. Next round. In this round, I want you to be present with your partner. You're not off somewhere else and disconnected. You're right here, but you're not open to them. So ready? Go. Act out. I'm here. I'm with you, and I'm absolutely not open to you. If you have an opinion, I could care less. And just notice what it feels like to be present but not open to someone. Nothing to do, just feel it. Notice what it's like to be with someone who's present with you and very clearly not open. What's the conversation going on? What's the future that's being created here? Just notice. Very good. Take a deep breath, shake it off. Next round. This one's a little more sophisticated, so do the best you can with it. I want you to now be with your partner. I want you to be present, and now I want you to be open, but I want you to be not connected. I'm open, but I'm not connected. What does that feel like? It's like I'm not pushing you away. I'm not closed. I'm open, but I'm just looking at you. I'm not with you yet. I don't feel like we're a we yet. So just act it out, however it makes sense for you. I'm present, I'm open, but I'm not connecting yet. I want you to notice the 3 versions we've done so far, no connection. Different ways to not be connected. Notice what it's like to be present and open and not connected. Notice what it's like to be with someone who's present and open and not connected with you. This is the experience of an event for most people called a meeting. Not connected. What's the conversation going on? What's the future showing up? Just notice. Okay, take a deep breath, shake it off. Very good. See, now we're experiencing. We're not just talking about it. Last round. I want you to be present. I want you to be open. And I now want you to connect with your partner. Really connect. That means you're with them all the way. You can feel them. It's like eye contact, like you're right there. You now are experiencing the we space. Now what's going on here is not just me. If you do something, I feel it. This is a we experience. This is what we want to get in conversation. You can't make trustworthy commitments if you don't have connection. And this is so available to us in our experience. It's a skill. And if you were blind to these different variations of how we somatically engage or disengage with people, you're not blind anymore. You now have choice. You now can practice. You can now notice when the conversation's off and bring it to connection. How are we doing? Good work. Big breath, a little celebration, high tens. Are we getting the point? That there is a foundation to this world of conversation that we are living, and the way we live it makes a difference. And one way we can live it, we can call leadership. And so with that, I'm going to skip here and go, let's see, hang on. Give me just a moment. So I'm going to share with you a picture of a conversation. This is part of the dispelling blindness. What this picture shows are different moments in the conversation where commitments happen. You can have a lot of talking. You see this circle? This circle is a conversation. You can have a lot of talking, but these labels are moments where a commitment happens. And so this shows a conversation between two people that take roles of a customer and performer is our name for them. A customer is someone who wants an outcome from someone else. That's why we call them a customer. They want to be satisfied. They're asking for a condition of satisfaction, and they would begin the conversation with some kind of request. They don't need to use the word request. It's not the word, it's how it's listened. And it turns out there's only 4 committed kinds of responses to a request. I can say yes, I can say no, I can counteroffer something different, or I can say, hey, I'll get back to you later. Those are 4 committed. And when I learned this and went back to work, I saw that the large majority of conversations around action in my company were not using these 4 moves, and they were unclear, they were uncommitted, and sloppy. And when I began to move this way and coach my team, we began to have better performance. But what are we doing here? We're human beings making commitments in conversation, creating the future together. Amazing. And this is where action and results come from. So that's kind of the anatomy of seeing the world, the human world. And let me just wrestle with how do we do this? We learn through practice. I'm not going to go to the details here, but here the practice produces embodiment. We need to go through regular practice. We need to practice listening. We need to practice connection to be good at it. And if we do that, then leadership is about finding your path to create the future with others. And with that, I'm going to open up to comments and questions. Feel free to write into the chat or raise your hand. I'd love to see what I've provoked for you in this introduction, which is basically showing you the power of a new context, the power of a new perspective that can identify new actions that you can physically take and do. Vipul, am I saying it right? Hi. Ah, you're on mute. Can you help him, Natalie?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah,
Hi,
it's
hi.
fine now. Yeah, hi, good evening. Okay,
Good evening.
thank you so much, Bob. I have one question.
See,
You see, whatever you do, that there is a trust factor which I feel is missing in the organization that I lead.
okay, very
And
good.
it is because, see, I am here to lead. In fact, see, I'm talking about a trust wherein I'm a trustee, and there are other people who were there in that organization,
Yes,
right? So now I've been above them for my position as a family who's running the place. And these people have been senior, right?
yes,
So what they are doing is they are creating doubt on new joinees, that
okay,
this is what is happening. And, like what you're saying about the conversation part, I try and connect with, it's a small organization. I try and connect with everybody.
okay, very good.
Many activities.
Yes. So
So that we have,
yeah, let me
Yeah.
offer what we've learned about trust. First of all, every promise provokes trust. Can I trust this promise? And so it's going on all the time. In fact, right now, do you trust the chair you're sitting on? Right? Do you
Yeah.
trust that when you go into traffic that people are going to follow rules or be safe? So trust is going on all the time. And when there's distrust, it's an opinion. It's an assessment that they have from some background of interpretation. When we deal with trust issues, what we want to do is say, what is their concern? What is their fear? What is it that they're not trusting? And then what conversation do we need to have where we can make promises that would take care of that concern? Most of the time, that works. Sometimes the promise they want is to grow wings and go to heaven. And, we can't satisfy that one right now. But distrust is a conversation, and it's one of the practices in generative leadership that how do we listen for trust? How do we produce trust? What's the conversation that's missing? So doubt, then if they're expressing doubt, they're basically, in the interpretation of listening that I would bring, they're basically saying, how do we do this process so that there's a promise I can trust about some future outcome? And that's a conversation to explore and see if they can be satisfied. If they're open, you may be able to take care of their concerns. Some people are just distrustful, and that's another dimension, and they need to be dealt with in another way. But you're absolutely right. Action is always about trust. Promises is always about trust. Identity is always about trust. And this is why this is one of the places we learned that we have to learn and practice, which is why we make this claim that leadership and coaching leaders is a profession, because this is one of many different skills that are needed to manage where people go and what reactions they have and what outcomes you're going to produce. So we could do a whole hour on trust, but is this helpful?
Actually, yes. I have gotten a cue from what you just said. I'll say the opinions that they are creating about me, and I can dispel that. This is what
Beautiful.
I get out of the whole conversation with you now.
Yeah, very
Thank you
good.
so much.
Congratulations. You see, we made it a conversation rather than a characteristic of a person. Because
Correct.
trust is always about a promise, not about a person. And when we forget that, it can get nasty. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Lute, what's cooking?
Thank you, Bob. You were talking about distrust, and I was thinking about if distrust has to be with me like a leader of how I communicate, or distrust has to be with the intention the other thinks that I have when I say something.
Yes.
It's not very clear for me, but
Okay. So there are 5 kinds of trust that we work with. You've identified the first one.
okay.
It's an opinion that I cannot believe what you're saying.
Okay.
It's an assessment of your sincerity. And so when you find that someone has that reaction to what you're saying, that I don't mean what I say, then that's a conversation to have. Why do you think I'm not sincere? Usually, the way you produce trust around sincerity is make promises and fulfill them.
Hmm.
And then people begin to see, oh, you actually do mean what you say.
You're trusty, right?
Exactly. That I am trustworthy, and we can build a future together by having. And it's also a very courageous conversation, but a very powerful one, because these are the kinds of assessments that people live with, but they never talk about it. And simply having this conversation opens up the possibility of a whole new relationship, a whole new future with a new conversation. So good luck with that one. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a comment or question? We're at the end of our time. Natalie.
Am I unmuted? Let's see.
Yes.
Yes. I'm always so touched by this idea that context, it's the context that we are in that asks the question. So the questions change
Yes.
with a new context, and how powerful that is. I think I get so wrapped up in content sometimes.
There you
that-
go.
Yeah.
There you go. So when we look at what I showed as the unit of coordination, the conversation for action, it has requests and negotiation. The content would be, this is what I'm requesting. This is what I want. The context is the action comes from a request, and it's putting my attention on, is it a clear request? Because if I'm moving from a context that I have to have clear requests to increase the likelihood of what I want to do, then my context is serving me in action. It's not just about the content of my request, it's about the quality of my request. And that puts my attention in a very powerful place. And this is a skill that is unavoidable and essential for leadership or for relationship, because it's about 2 people creating the future together.
It's so profound. It's so profound.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's so accessible,
Yes.
so actionable. That's what generative leadership is about, to take these new, as you say, profound perspectives that give us more powerful choices and learn to shift our habits of how we see the world, how we interact with other people for the sake of producing outcomes that I would hope turn into a good life. That I know what I care about, I'm taking care of what I care about, and I'm producing value, satisfaction for me and those I care about. So with that, I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this conversation. It's always an inspiration to me. And I invite you, we'll be having further webinars that I invite you to come back and join with us. And I'll announce again, let me show the screen in case someone wasn't here, that we also have, I've got all kinds of good stuff, but we have our intensive workshop coming in October. It'll be online, 8 hours a day for October 19th, 20th, and 26th. It'll be a 4-hour day on the 27th, where we're going to take these topics, really experience the new context of being generative, go into the questions of how that shows up in your life, your choices, your next step, and walk out of there with the ability to see the world as opportunities to go beyond your edge, have new conversations, and produce results that you care about. That's the invitation for that event, and I hope to see many of you there. So thank you again for coming and for your engagement. And what we say at the end of our events, I'll share it here. We say, go out and create the future, because you are anyway. But now that you're aware of that, hopefully you can do a better job. Okay, thank you for being here.